Hey, and welcome to AUDIOTEK's fourth video tutorial on Cubase 6.5. This will be a beginner's tutorial on editing audio clips in Cubase. In a later tutorial, I'll get into more advanced details. If you are an advanced Cubase user already, I suspect there will be a tip or two for you here as well. You might want to have a pen and paper ready to take some notes, because this is when we really kick off with the actual stuff you'll be spending the most of your time in Cubase doing. And also, this one is going to be a very long first look at editing in Cubase. If I'm moving too quickly, simply press pause to catch your breath or to complete your notes. Let's get on with it. Cubase has excellent tools for editing audio clips. In the first video tutorial, I introduced you to the tools on top. You have a lot of options on the clip itself, however. With the Object Selection tool active, shortcut 1, hover your mouse on top of an audio clip in your project. Notice the two triangles on top and the two squares on the bottom. This is for quick and easy dragging to create fades or adjusting the start and end of the audio clip. Notice also the single square on top center of the clip. Clicking and dragging on the triangle in the left corner will create a start fade, and the top right triangle will create a fade in the end. The lower left corner square will adjust the start of the clip, and as you probably guessed already, the lower right square will adjust the end. The top center square will determine the volume of the clip. Remember, I'm not adjusting the track volume, I'm adjusting the volume of this particular clip on the track. You can simply click and then drag on the square to either increase or decrease the volume. As I drag, notice the little helper telling me first how much I'm gaining from the original volume value, and then the difference between this volume gain and the previous one. So if I let go of this, and I drag again, notice when I adjust the volume again that it remembers the volume boost from before, and tells me first how much volume I gained overall from the clip, and then followingly how much I've gained it from the previous gain. When raising the volume on the clip, you have a maximum of 24 dBFS. Now, one very important note here is that this is pre-insert and it's pre-sense. So if you want to regulate the volume of the track itself, instead use a channel strip. We'll delve into this stuff later in this tutorial series, so you'll get a grasp of why and when this is important. But basically, just know this. When you boost the clip volume, you will send more volume into your plugin signal chain, and in most cases, you want to avoid it. If, however, the purpose is to feed your plugins a bit more, or in case there is no inserts on the track, feel free to do it. Okay, now on to the fades I just mentioned. Let's play back the clip and listen to how things turned out. As you can hear, the volume slowly climbs along with the fade curve, and the same goes for an end fade. Okay, a bit later in this tutorial I'll show you how to control those fade curves to your liking. Now on to the top tools. Some of the tools on top have sub-tools. This is shown by the little triangle below. The Object Selection tool are the one giving you the clip dragging functions. So let's take a look at the Object Selection tool's sub-tools. The normal sizing one is the primary tool, and the one you will use most of your time. Sizing moves contents is not as common, and let me show you what it does. As you can see, I'm no longer cutting anything off from the start. Instead, I'm moving the contents from the start towards the end of the clip. But I can also drag from the end towards the start. And the same goes here. This time you move the contents of the end of the clip towards the start. So let's move on to the third Object Selection tool called Sizing Applies Time Stretch. This one will not adjust the end or start positions, and it won't cut off any audio of your clip either. But when you click and drag on either of the lower squares on the clip, It will instead either speed up or speed down the audio material within the clip to match the clip size. Let's take a listen to the audio clip to give you an example. Now, if I drag from the left to the right, you'll see how the clip is shorter. However, the audio material is the same. Let's take a listen now. Notice how I speed up the music now. This can be very effective when syncing beats or loops with the current BPM, or for primitive manual timing adjustments of a choppy performance. Okay, you can adjust the quality of the time stretch subtool in the preferences. Now, note that you can always head for a more advanced dialog for time stretching where you can choose the quality of that particular time stretch. When you use the subtool, however, it's usually for minor adjustments, and I'd recommend you not to set the quality too high. It's gonna take some rendering time to calculate things. But let me show you how you can change the quality. Open Preferences up in the File menu. Okay, now look for the editing category. Just below this, click on Audio. First from the top, you see a roll down bar from Time Stretch Tool Algorithm. Click it and select your preferred algorithm. Mine is set to real time, and this means that there's no rendering going on. Instead, it calculates the time stretch in real time. If, however, performance is an issue, select one of the Impex algorithms on the list. My recommendation for quick and easy time stretching is the Polyfast one. Polycomplex takes a lot of time, and again, whenever you are concerned about making serious time stretching, there is more advanced tools and dialogues. There's a lot more you can configure in the preferences, by the way, but for now, click Apply and OK to start the setting. Okay, remember that the shortcut for the Object Selection tool is 1. For each time I press 1, it will switch between my main tool and 2 subtools. And the current mode is indicated by the cursor icon, so remember that. Let's move on from the Object Selection tool to the Range Selection tool. Shortcut 2 on the keyboard. Now, notice 2 things. First, the triangles around the clip is gone. Second, this tool does not have a subtool. The range selection is not limited to audio clips. What I mean is, it's not a clip selection tool. It won't snap to audio clips inside the blue shade of the range selection. Instead, it treats everything inside as one contained selection. So if I press delete on the keyboard now, watch what happens. As you can see, all within the range has now been deleted. And instead of deleting the underlying clips, it just cut off the clip material inside the range. This makes it an extremely useful tool. It's also incredibly useful for moving contents from one clip to a brand new one. Notice how the cursor changed to a hand when I move it and hover it on the clip contents inside the range. If I click and drag now, it will cut off this material and let me drag it to a new location. When I release the mouse, it will be placed on a new location completely isolated. You can also hold Alt down from your keyboard while clicking and dragging, and instead of moving the contents, it will create a copy of it. So if I release my mouse now, notice how a new copy has been created, while the original clip is still intact. If you Shift plus click, you can make a new selection, even if your selection starts within the current selection. If you didn't hold down Shift, it would show you the hand icon, and that means you'll be moving what's inside the range. Try shift clicking instead and notice how the hand disappears, which means you can start a new selection from within the current one. I can also expand or narrow my selection by hovering the mouse on the left or right edge of the range. Notice how the icon changes to 2 horizontally opposite facing mouse cursors. If I click and drag on any edge when this icon shows, I won't move anything inside the range, but instead I'll expand or narrow the range selection. If I hold down Ctrl and click anywhere within the vertical confinements of the range selection, it will automatically expand to where I clicked. But this is just a short way of refining the edges like I just showed you before. When hovering above the lower or top edge of the range selection, I get the same icon with the two mouse cursors, but this time in vertically opposite facing directions. So if I click and drag down, this selection will extend to the track below. The control-click shortcut I just showed you works here as well. So if I made a range selection on one track, I can control plus click on the one below to add it to the range selection. So remember the many uses of the range selection tool. It is one of your strongest tools, and so remember the benefits. Now we have a long way to go still, so take a break or a cup of coffee if you need to, and then let's move on. Okay, next up is the splitter tool, and the shortcut is 3. This scissor icon is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, the splitter lets you chop up the clip into separate ones, which you can then either move, delete, fade, or in other ways manipulate, isolated from each other. So with the splitter selected, I'm gonna go ahead and click on the clip on the first track. And as you can see, the point where I click now is breaking this clip into new separate ones. I can then move, fade, or simply delete one of the clips as I like. If you want to get it back, you can either hit Ctrl+C for undoing, or you can choose the object selection tool again, which is the main one, shortcut 1, and drag from the end towards the right to return to the original state. Okay, so on from the splitter tool, the next one is called the glue tool, but we'll wait with that one for later in this series. But basically, it puts 2 or more clips in a clip folder, which you can then open in a sub-panel and play around with. So next up is the eraser tool, and the shortcut is 5 on your keyboard. This one is sort of a one-click way of erasing clips. You could also click on the clip with your primary object selection tool and simply press delete on the keyboard. The eraser tool does the same thing. One other feature of the eraser is holding down Alt while clicking on the clip, and this will delete all following clip material on that track. Okay, next up is the zoom tool, and the shortcut is 6. And this lets you zoom in just a bit by simply clicking once on a location. You can also click and drag to window select the area you want to zoom in on. And for zooming out, hold Ctrl down and click the necessary amount of times. If you hold Shift down and click, it will zoom to show the full extent of the clip. Now if you hold down Alt and you click on a part of the clip with the zoom tool, it will center the specific point you clicked on in your view. Remember, you can always zoom in on all tracks either horizontally or vertically down in the right corner using the 2 sliders. Okay, next up is one of my favorite tools, and it's called the mute tool. The shortcut is 7. This will not mute the track, and it won't delete any clips on it either. But what it will do is mute the selected clip on the track from playback. Let me show you an example. I'm going to use the splitter tool to separate my clip into 2 pieces. I'm now going to choose the mute tool and click on the clip to the right of my split to mute it. Now let's play back the track just before the mute happens. Notice how the first clip is playing, but the muted one isn't. This is extremely helpful when you aren't certain of whether you want the contents of the clip playing or not. And then you have the ability of going back and listening to the muted contents. Simply click on the clip again to unmute it with the mute tool selected. Okay, the next tool is the comp tool, but you will only be using this when working with lanes, so let's simply skip it for now. Basically, it's a tool for picking between different takes on a single recording. If you have been using Pro Tools before, you will recognize the lanes option as very similar to the playlists function in Pro Tools. Okay, so next up is the time warp tool. This too is an advanced tool that we will be looking at in the dynamic tempo tutorial. It won't have an impact on the clip itself, but it will have an impact on the grid you are working with, and also the clips' relation to each other and the grid. And by the way, I'm using the term clips to describe those boxes that holds audio waveforms. That's just because I prefer this term, and it comes from Pro Tools originally. But to use proper Cubase terms, it's actually called events. So whenever you stumble upon the term events, just think of it as a barrier that holds information, or in this case, audio waveforms. Let's move on to the next tool. It's called the Draw tool, and the shortcut is 8. This is one of your main tools when you work with MIDI. It is, however, extremely competent with audio as well. Check out the cool stuff you can do with it on audio clips. Even without enabling automation, which we will be talking about in a later tutorial, I can use the Draw tool to curve out dynamic clip volume. Earlier in this tutorial, I told you about the top center square on an audio clip you hover over when you use the Object Selection tool. To remind you, this one regulates the overall clip volume. Now, however, with the Draw tool, I might want some part of the clip louder than other parts. It's most effective when, for instance, you want to feed a plugin, let's say a compressor, with more input volume in some parts of the clip, instead of automating the input volume of the compressor. If this is all nonsense to you right now, don't worry. We'll get far more into this later. Now check out what you can do by clicking anywhere on your audio clip with the Draw tool. Notice the blue line. This you can call a segment. Notice also the green dot. This indicates a point on the curve. So if I click some more places, notice how new segments and points appears. This is basically your clip volume curve. So if I play this back, take a listen to the variations in clip volume, even though my track volume stays the same. If you click and drag, it's easier to look at what you're doing exactly. The waveform in the back updates in real time, so you can see a graphic representation of what you are actually doing. You can always simply click to create new points and adjust the curve to your liking. Hold down Shift and look how your cursor changes to the eraser icon. Whenever you click on a point with Shift pressed, the point below will be deleted. Hold Ctrl down and click in order to create a new point, but not where your cursor is currently in the vertical axis, but on the line in its current position. This can be useful if you want to create a new point close to a previous one, and then drag that one around. So, you have unlimited control, basically, over your volume curve. Remember this one for the next time you want dynamic control of the volume you feed your plugins with, or in cases when you don't want to turn on automation on the track for a single clip you want advanced volume control over. Let's move on to the next tool, and that's called the Line tool. This also have a set of subtools indicated by the triangle below it. The Line tool's subtools are other shapes such as the parabola, triangle or square. This one will not come in handy before I work with either MIDI or automation, but it's a tool for drawing, for instance, volume curves in automation as standard shapes instead of clicking away from point to point. But let's skip it for now. And then finally, the last tool we have is the Play tool. The shortcut is 9 on your keyboard. Notice the subtool indicated by the triangle below it. Click it and it will show you the subtool Scrub. Now, the Play tool lets you instantaneously play back only what's on the clip you click and hold down your mouse on, right from where you click on it. Let me show you an example. So it's kind of a one-click method of soloing the track, navigating your playback position to the desired location and hitting play. It can be very effective when you're thinking, what's happening on that particular clip? Okay, so the Scrub subtool is a fun tool, and if you ever pressed play on a tape machine, you'll feel right at home with it. This lets you click on a location of the clip and scrub by holding the mouse down and dragging horizontally, either left or right. If you drag right, it will play back in a forward motion in the speed of which you are dragging. but at a maximum of the standard pace of the clip. If you drag to the left, it will play back in a reverse motion. To make this much more clear, let me show you instead. Awesome. Okay, so that's it with the top tools. Remember, for all multi-tools, you can simply press the numerical shortcut a couple of times to switch between the main and sub-tools. Also, for most of those tools, remember you can switch your relation to the grid on or off by pressing the snap icon. So for instance, the range selection or the splitter will snap to the assigned grid points or not. Now hold on for the last section. I didn't show you how to crossfade yet, and I didn't show you how to customize the curve of your fades either. Let's start with crossfading. Okay, crossfading is a method of creating seamless transitions between two overlapping clips. And it should be one of your top 3 most common editing tools. So you better get off from a great start with crossfades. If you don't, you'll be hearing clicks and crackles whenever you play back the transition between two overlapping audio clips. In this particular example, I'm going to show you how to crossfade those two overlapping clips. But in real life situations, you're gonna be using crossfades all the time when you have recorded a performance over 2 or more takes. Like for instance, say you recorded a bass line and hit a wrong note. Instead of starting over, you simply pressed record around the point you hit the wrong note on a new clip. And that's one of the benefits of digital recording. It's so easy to take it from where you played a mistake and record from there. But notice the click or crackle sound that happens in many cases due to the interruption in the wave cycles. And oftentimes it cuts through the whole mix, and it can be quite annoying. The way to get around this is using crossfades. Let me show you how easy it is to make crossfades. Okay, with any tool selected, notice the pattern of lines that appear when you hover above 2 overlapping clips. This indicates how much they are overlapping. It also indicates how big your crossfade will be. Here's the trick. Simply press X on the keyboard to create the crossfade. That's it. There's not much to it. Notice how the crossfade displayed as an X, which will remind you of the shortcut, is the same size as the overlapping part of the clips. This also means that if your audio clips are overlapping a lot, your crossfade will be very large, which in most cases isn't what you want. So in order to size your crossfade afterwards, simply select the Object Selection tool. And then you can hover to the edge of the crossfade. And then as you can see, it will turn your mouse icon into the 2 opposite facing arrows. And that indicates that if you click and drag now, you can resize your crossfade. Again, notice the X shape. It's actually 2 fades intersecting, one up and one down. And you can change the curve of the crossfade, just like with fades. What's cool about it is that you can assign a default shape that will always happen for all your crossfades. So let's take a look on the crossfade dialog before we move on to the fades. Here's how you open it. Either press X another time and Cubase will think, hey, you already made a crossfade, so I guess that means you want to adjust it. Or you can simply double click the crossfade. I'll go ahead and double click on the crossfade this time. And this opens the crossfade dialog. And notice, by the way, how the project window rescales, as I mentioned in the previous tutorial. In all major DAWs, and this goes for Cubase as well, there are 2 main styles of crossfading, and both are simply different fade curves. Their names are equal power and equal gain. Theoretically, equal power is better when you're crossfading between different types of musical material, while equal gain is better for similar music material, such as a chopped up guitar, bass, or drums performance. I, however, personally almost always use the equal power crossfades, and I tend to think the opposite is true. In my book, equal power crossfades create the least audible transitions. By experience, you'll find out what suits you, but I'd recommend you change the default setting from the current equal gain to equal power instead. Simply click equal power to change the current crossfade curve. Now to set it as default, click on as default. You can also customize the crossfade to your liking in the graphic curve editor to the left. But I'd recommend you not to do it. Always use either equal gain or equal power for the best crossfade effects. You can also play your crossfade to make the transition as good as possible right here from the crossfade dialog. So when you are satisfied, hit OK. The fades dialog is just as simple. Here's how to do it. As I explained in the start of this tutorial, in order to make fades, pick your object selection tool and drag either the top left or the top right triangle on an audio clip to create a fade. And then if you want to customize it, you can simply double click the fade curve just like with crossfades and it will open the fades dialog. From here you can change the individual fade by picking a shape preset or drawing your own one. And you can also set it as the default by clicking as default. The curve kind 3 buttons on top of the graph lets you control how soft or edgy the segments will be between your points. So that's it. Hit OK when you're satisfied and you're back. And I think that's all for this first, yet in-depth look on editing audio clips in Cubase 6.5. We didn't touch at all upon the advanced editing features, which we will look at a little bit later. But for now, I hope you learned something and thanks for stopping by. See you in the next one.